Look at all the latest stories making the headlines this evening with the ITV News at 10.
US police hunt for accomplices of the New Year's attacker in New Orleans. Army veteran Shamsuddin Jabbar killed at least 10 people in a suspected terror attack. The FBI say he had an IS flag and was not working alone.
We do not believe that Jabbar was solely responsible. We are aggressively running down every lead, including those of his known associates.
Eyewitnesses described scenes of carnage after his truck was driven directly into crowds. We'll be live in the US. Also tonight, misery for flood-hit residents in Greater Manchester.
This is ITV News with Romilly Weeks.
Good evening. A major manhunt is underway in the United States tonight for more people linked to a suspected terror attack in New Orleans, which has left 10 dead. Police say a 42-year-old US resident and Army veteran drove a truck at high speed into crowds celebrating the arrival of the new year. He was killed at the scene after opening fire on police with an IS flag found in his vehicle. And tonight the FBI said they don't believe he was acting alone. We'll have the latest from Washington in a moment, but first Neil Connery's report, which contains details viewers may find distressing.
3:15 a.m. and police swarm New Orleans after the attack in a street crowded with New Year's revelers. It started as a white pickup truck makes a sharp turn, screeching its way past barricades. Officers run towards Bourbon Street in the city's historic French Quarter as the driver targets a large crowd.
Oh my God.
The white truck seen below as the human cost left in its wake became clear.
Something just barreling down the street, bro. I kid you not. Like, real life horror movie. Everything the car is hitting, it's getting thrown. It's getting thrown up into the air in a way.
We counted around 8 bodies very quickly, right in our area. Another young, small girl was dancing when we were coming up the street, and she was just completely flat. But just the fact that these people are somebody's people, and they're not going to be there this morning, it's rough.
The driver, who was armed, shot and wounded 2 police officers after crashing before he was killed. The FBI are investigating the attack as an act of terrorism. Improvised explosive devices along with an IS flag were found in the rented vehicle. The FBI say the dead suspect was Shamsuddin Jabbar. He was 42 and a US Army veteran from Texas, who they say was honorably discharged.
We do not believe that Jabbar was solely responsible. We are aggressively running down every lead, including those of his known associates. That's why we need the public's help. Other potential IEDs were also located in the French Quarter. As of now, 2 IEDs have been found and rendered safe.
President Biden gave his reaction.
The reaction was one of anger and frustration. I've contacted every agency in the federal government as well as the state. They're all coordinating to get to the bare facts. We know what the facts are.
What began as a night of celebration ended as one of horror. It is the darkest of beginnings to a new year in New Orleans. Neil Connery, ITV News.
And we can speak now to our correspondent Robert Moore in Washington. Robert, what makes the FBI seem so convinced that this suspect was not acting alone?
Well, these are early moments in an extremely complex investigation. But you're right, as you heard there, the FBI agents do not believe they are looking at a lone wolf attack, rather a sort of terrorist cell linked to ISIS. And the primary evidence for that, we are told, is from surveillance video showing 3 men and a woman planting those improvised explosive devices It's also why the governor of Louisiana has said tonight they are hunting down a gang. It's why local politicians there have urged residents in New Orleans to be calm but vigilant. It's why a major sports event taking place there tonight has been postponed by 24 hours. And Romilly, the FBI are also now investigating a second potential terrorist attack. This is one in Las Vegas when a Tesla truck blew up, exploded and caught fire. This is video from inside the hotel lobby. The location and the ferocity of the fire, potentially involving mortars and fireworks, certainly means the FBI now probing whether these are two terrorist attacks, 2,000 miles and 6 hours apart, although at this stage there is no clear evidence the two attacks are linked. And of course, the other point, Romilly, is that we are less than 3 weeks away from a presidential inauguration here in Washington, which is why there is so much focus and urgency behind these twin FBI investigations.
Right, Robert, thank you. Police in Greater Manchester declared a major incident today after widespread flooding caused by heavy rain overnight. Residents in Stockport had to be rescued from their homes after being surrounded by water. And tonight, flood warnings remain in place across the country. And the Met Office says there's a risk of snow and ice for much of the UK in the coming days. Here's Alex Isat.
Turbulent and fast-flowing, the power of the Mersey was in full force after a month's worth of rain fell within 48 hours. Drivers abandoned their vehicles as water blocked roads and paths.
Went down and had a look at the river. The river was very high, highest it's been, highest it's ever been since records been. Because we've had some really big floods there in 2020 when the record was set for water levels. These New Year's Day floods occurred at just about the worst time possible. You know, peak flows occurring at 5 or 6 in the morning on New Year's Day, when most people were asleep after celebrating New Year.
My car's underwater. It's definitely written off.
For residents in a Stockport apartment block, they spent their New Year's morning with no water or power after the River Tame burst and had to wait until the water receded before they could be rescued. The mountain rescue team were brought in to evacuate people in the worst affected areas of Wigan, Didsbury, Bolton and Stockport.
Got a car stuck in the water.
Across the north of England, the rain made travelling difficult, with authorities telling people to stay home if they can. Although water levels have been falling today, there are still weather warnings in place across the country and more than 90 flood warnings still active nationwide. Alex Isat, ITV News.
The scale of the challenge the government faces to deal with illegal immigration was clear today as the Home Office released new figures on small boat crossings. Nearly 37,000 people arrived across the Channel last year. That's up 25% on 2023, but still short of the record numbers of 2022. And our deputy political editor, Anushka Astana, is with me now. Anushka, there's a bit of a blame game going on about these figures, isn't there?
Yeah, a real war of words. You know, when Labour first came to power in July, one of the first things Keir Starmer said was that plan to deport asylum seekers to Rwanda was an expensive gimmick, and he scrapped it. Speaking to government sources today, they are sticking by that. They say that £700 million was spent on that scheme, and still 84,000 people crossed the Channel after the deal had been signed. They say this increase in numbers is partly a hangover of Conservative policy, but also the weather, an unusually calm October that encouraged more boats to cross over. But look, the Conservatives totally reject that. I was speaking to the Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp today. He argued that the reason that Rwanda wasn't working is that no flights had actually taken off because of legal challenge and political challenge. He said if Labour had carried on with this, then the numbers would have come down. He pointed to a scheme in Australia as evidence that it could have worked. But the government isn't budging. They believe in enforcement, in smashing the gangs. And the CEO of the Refugee Council, who we heard from earlier, argued that's fine, but it isn't enough.
That's all well and good, but in and of itself, it won't actually stop people getting in the boats, because these are people who are in search of safety, who are pretty desperate. So what the government also needs to look at is providing legal routes so that they don't have to take dangerous crossings.
The Refugee Council want to focus on the human cost, a record number of deaths last year, 77 when crossing the Channel. But neither Labour nor the Conservatives want to see more safe routes. They're also facing political pressure from elsewhere. Nigel Farage, it won't surprise you, mentioned this in his New Year's message, saying that both parties had failed.
Right, Anushka, thank you. A group of MPs has said the government should face fines if it doesn't speed up the process of compensating victims of the Horizon Post Office IT scandal. Just under £500 million of the £1.8 billion budgeted to compensate victims has been paid out so far. The government says it's working tirelessly to speed up the process. Hundreds of sub-postmasters were wrongly prosecuted and convicted between 1999 and 2015. Based on information from a faulty accounting system. Fireworks lit up skylines around the world last night to mark the arrival of the new year. In London, tens of thousands gathered along the River Thames to watch the display in the capital, where 12,000 fireworks welcomed 2025. And in New York's Times Square, the traditional ball drop kicked off the party, with crowds singing and dancing to Frank Sinatra's New York, New York. And finally, Liverpool might be hot favourites to win the Premier League title, but Arsenal, for one, haven't given up hope of catching them. The Gunners started 2025 with a crucial victory at Brentford, coming from behind to win 3-1. And Chris Scudder was watching.
Arsenal looked the part in their smart baseball-style tops, but the last thing Mikel Arteta needed in their pursuit of leaders Liverpool was an early cut.
And that's it for tonight. From all the team, good night.
Is it morning? It is morning.